What happens when you replace the pinnacle of your value hierarchy or your hierarchy for being or existence, in other words, with the pursuit of pleasure? Today, that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm in Genesis chapter 19, which is the point in Abraham's journey right after he just encountered some angels or beings and God. And we talked about on when was it? Monday? It's been Monday. It's been a while for me going from recording every day. So Monday we talked about how God debated and actually considered carefully whether to tell Abraham or not and make him aware of whether or not he should know that he is going to nuke Sodom and Gomorrah, for instance, because he's been hearing. It seems like the depiction of the story is he's been hearing ramblings or rumors or something, and it being God, he knows everything, but he's been hearing things about Sodom and Gomorrah and how it's heretical, basically, right? And these things that concern God, and he knows he's going to have to wipe it from the map, I believe. Obviously knows that because he knows everything. So today, as I read the story, it is about what happens right after that meeting with Abraham, and the angels are going to Sodom and Gomorrah to go investigate what God's been hearing about Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham pleaded with God to not get rid of it. And God's like, if I can even find, I think the lowest numeric value was 10. If I can find 10 people, he'll save the city. And so we'll start there today. How's everyone doing? I see there's 4 people in here. And it's been great actually just researching stuff about this. And I'll start the adventure by reading the text, and then I'll give you my takeaways and whatnot. Are any of you familiar with this story? Very much at all? Guys, it's wild. Stuff gets wild in Sodom and Gomorrah. They get wild there. All right, so I need to get used to having long hair. It's in my mouth. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. My lords, he said, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered. We will spend the night in the square. Good morning, Vaporama. But he insisted so strongly that they go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them. That's in there. Lot went outside to meet them, shut the door behind him. This is where it gets even better. And said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. Get out of our way, they replied. And they said, this fellow came here as an alien, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness so that they could not find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-laws, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city. but his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. And I'm going to stop there for today because I have enough here to talk about for probably 5 years. I don't know, who knows. What I find interesting, and I just picked up some stuff as I was just reading it, God is good, is when after the two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate. What that showed to me is like God strategically had his hand in this scenario, right? That he placed Lot at the gate at the moment the angels were arriving there, intentionally there to destroy it. Okay, so he placed Lot there, that way they would see him and he would see them. God knew that. He carefully and strategically set up this ordained appointment for all of these people involved and angels involved, right? Which is good to hear, and it's good to read about, and it's good to really digest that and contemplate that, because that means no matter where you're at in life, God has a hand and he is orchestrating things behind the scenes that may not make sense. It may seem like nothing, and you may take them for granted in your life as you carry on about your day, but he still has his hand in everything. And even if it doesn't look like a miracle, just the fact that we are walking out and doing things, and interacting with people, everything has the potential to be a miracle that we can realize in every moment of the day. It's just, we get caught up in the frequencies of this earth and the world, and we get caught up in the frequencies that are going on in our head and all the ramblings that we have about ourselves and our interactions with others, and we miss moments of God and how he is orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. So I also think that he did this and he orchestrated this because he is honoring Abraham, and not only honoring Abraham, but honoring Abraham's desires, right? Because Lot isn't an essential point within Abraham's calling from God. I wouldn't say that he is. He is not a required element of Abraham bringing it to fruition. I would not say he is. Now, they had to split already, right? That's why Lot is in Sodom and Gomorrah. So you can see the mercy of God here, and the caring, the compassion of God on Abraham, just by how God is looking out for his friend. And as we talk about Abraham's behavior later on in this little section that I read, which was just for those that care and want to maybe read this yourself as we're going along here. It's Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 all the way. I went through, where did I stop? I went through verse 15 to its end. Oh, no, I went all the way through verse 16. So I went through Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 16. And we see there his behavior, Lot's behavior. He's at the city gate, just happens to be. God orchestrated this. He seems to have picked up this culture, this hedonistic culture, which is what the topic is going to be about today, that he's living in, which speaks to why it is you have to be mindful of who you surround yourself with, and not only who you surround yourself with, but how permeable is your mind, and how much you allow things to influence you that are from the outside, right? And maybe not even the outside, but maybe the inside. Because there's a mechanic that happens when you take any exterior information and you're thinking about it, right? There is an allowance to let it change your thoughts. And it's hard because we usually just take it for granted. And so you can see Lot is here, and he's been shifted by the culture that he is living within. And the reason that he's living within it is because he's separated from Abraham. And it's good to see that even though Lot is expressing, I would say, evil behavior, malevolent behavior, and disgusting, that God still has mercy on him, and he is still under the care of God, right? And it also seems like God's plan, he shifted it for Abraham's desires to be a friend to Lot, right? Because Abraham cared about Lot, and God's caring of Abraham and his calling. He's honoring Abraham through this compassion he's given Lot. And Lot probably doesn't even know this, but that's crazy that the blessing, the runoff from Abraham is going on to his friends in manners that they don't even realize or know, right? And it's so crazy how Lot was, his mindset. We don't really know. We don't know him personally, right? We can only pick up what we read through the text. But when you see a man like this being shifted by their culture, it's like I was saying on Monday, people, there's a reason why they come to the mindset and they come to the opinions that they have. So if you run into people and discuss things with people that they vehemently disagree with you, you should consider there's a reason why they are the way they are. And it could have started when they were in infancy, like biologically and psychologically, right? They maybe they were fertilized with information as a seed and grown into this plant, this organism now through influence their whole life. And there's a reason why they're at where they're at and you're at where you're at. And because we see Lot here being so influenced by the exterior influences in his life. And at the same time, God still has mercy on him, because we see that the angels initially wanted to go to the center of the town, which makes sense. God wants to go to the epicenter of the town square, right? And I think back in those days, you would have people rummaging around, right? You would have people talking, people walking around. They'd be able to observe the populace and observe the culture, right? And it seems like God changed his plans, right? Because God is obviously in charge of the angels, and the angels probably have a relationship to God that we aren't exactly keen to, right? And it looks like it is. They wanted to stay in the town square, but Lot was like, "Hey, let's go. You can just stay with me instead." And they did that. They honored that. And so that's amazing that he did that. And so after that, we see that the angels are there, and then the townspeople, they come there and they start demanding, "Hey," you have to imagine probably the angels are beautiful. They are attractive. They have something about them. Probably just the grace of God, like their spirit is probably attractive to humanity, right? Like you see that with people. There's some people that just glow, and you imagine just how much angels would glow. And they're in this hedonistic culture where it seems like their value system is to gain pleasure regardless of anything else. And it seems to be stemming from a place of selfishness and egotism, because they demand that Lot bring the men out so they can have sex with them. And then we see after that, Lot, it's so crazy. I just noticed that when I just read it this time. Lot is saying these men are protected by the roof of his house, right? Where is it verbatim? He says, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who've never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, but they have come under the protection of my roof, the protection of his roof. Don't miss that. So he's saying these men that came there are under the protection of his roof. And I would ask, what protection is that if you are willing to take your two daughters, virgin daughters, and submit them to this mob for them to do what they would like to them with whatever they want? What kind of protection is that? That speaks to just how disgusting you can become and disgust just how, man, off kilter and off how things that are absolutely insane and completely asinine seem normal to you. Like, no second thought to it. He literally just offered his daughters up for rape, basically, to the mob. And he's like, but leave these men alone in my house because they're protected by my roof. That's insane. This town obviously was toxic, for one. And it seems like they've fallen into the trap of putting the pursuit of pleasure at the top of their pinnacle of their value hierarchy, or their hierarchy for being. And I did some digging and some research on this. And some notes that I have written down for this. And please chime in if any of you have any ideas or thoughts on this. Is it seems to be God needs to check out Portland, Oregon. I don't know. I've never been there. But so I have the population seems to have devolved into a state that values hedonistic egoism above all else. And hedonistic egoism is the theory that we ought to, morally speaking, do whatever that makes us happiest. And that is whatever provides us with the most net pleasure after the pain is subtracted. Now, that's kind of complicated because some people find pleasure in pain, right? Which I think the word for that is somatic or masochistic. Regardless, I then noted that hedonism refers to the prioritization of pleasures in one's lifestyle, actions, or thoughts. The term can include a number of theories or practices across philosophy, art, and psychology, encompassing both sensory pleasure and more intellectual or personal pursuits, but can also be used in everyday parlance as a pejorative for the egoistic pursuit of short-term gratification at the expense of others, which is what you would have seen here. He wants them to release the men out of this house. So, I mean, not he, well, whoever the speaker of the mob was, right? Whoever probably was the leader. I'm sure there were multiple men speaking there. And it said that it was all the men from the town, like young and old, right? This is a contagion. This mindset is a contagion that has spread through the whole town. And think about how crazy that is, right? It seems far-fetched, but it's not. People take it so much for granted how normal our lives are. Look throughout history at the catastrophes and the terrible things that have happened to people. Good morning. Good morning, Zephyr. And the terrible things that people are willing to do to each other. Think about the place that you have to be mentally for it to be normal to gather in a mob in order to demand some visitors of your town to be brought out from the house so everyone can have sex with them. That's wild. And then this kind of thing can happen when you replace whatever is at the top of your hierarchy with a pursuit of pleasure, because all reasoning and logic goes out the door. You just want to feel good. You're doing whatever feels good. And there's this thing called the paradox of hedonism, which is it's counterintuitive to what people would think, but it's something that was noted by initially by this utilitarian philosopher Henry Sidgwick in a book called The Method of Ethics. And this guy was an economist, philosopher, um, and he noted that the paradox of hedonism is that pleasure cannot be acquired directly. This form of ethical hedonism equates the moral good with the pleasure of the individual. So for Sidgwick, the overly conscious pursuit of pleasure is self-defeating because it promotes pleasure seeking in a way that results in diminished pleasure. So it has diminishing returns, right? Like the dopamine kick you probably get from it has diminishing returns. And anyone can feel this way, right? We all can relate to this. If you do something the first time, it feels really good, right? But after you do it, let's say you do it every single day, it doesn't feel as good the first time. I'll just be transparent. Like the first time you hear about people that get addicted to drugs, right? And there's a lot of uppers out there. When you snort cocaine, for instance, that first line that you snort, that's the highest you get. That's it. That is it. And all lines thereafter in the night, you're chasing that first high, but you will never reach it. You won't reach it because you just went from the state of soberness to now getting high. And cocaine and methamphetamines, for instance, is pure happiness chemically, right? That you're inputting into your body. And there's no cost to it besides the ramifications thereafter, right? Obviously. But what I'm saying is the action to gain that happiness from that drug is just putting it in your body. And it's crazy how you chase that first high, and then if you continue to do it all night, right, you won't ever get that first high, but you'll still be happy throughout the night. And it speaks to the diminishing returns here. Just like in any habit that you have in life, it feels really good when you first do it, but you grow numb to it after you do it every day. You know, the 500th time that I've gone out and run 3 miles, it's not going to feel the same. The achievement from that, right? The self-achievement feeling that I have from that won't feel as great and as grand as the first time that I actually was able to run 3 miles, right? It doesn't at all. And people run into this when they go, oh, I can use the example of losing weight or getting healthy. It's it's the journey that brings about the pleasure in it, right? And the end goal, once you get there, you just kind of remain static, right? You keep that. You keep that state of being healthy or losing all that weight. But it loses its magic. Things lose their magic over time. And that is the paradox of hedonism, because it's it makes sense because I have my notes here. Pleasure in and of itself, I don't think is meaningful enough for us to strive for our entire life and then feel good about the time of our existence thereafter, because pleasure is fleeting. And as others have noted, the acquiring of pleasure, it has diminishing returns. You grow numb to it. And the way something excites you initially isn't as good as like the 500th time, like I just mentioned. And what once you perceive as a beautiful existence, seeking pure bliss and happiness for yourself and others, will twist and contort itself into an incessant and infinite devouring maw whose hunger can never be filled. That is what happens when you replace the pinnacle of your value hierarchy or your belief hierarchy, your hierarchy for being, with the pursuit of pleasure, with just pursuing things that make you feel good. That is what happens. You can never, it is this endless maw. It is this endless maw. It will never be satiated. And I'll just say it from the Christian perspective. God should be at the pinnacle of your hierarchy, right? And people will be like, well, duh, no kidding. But I would say, are you living that out? Are you acting as such? Do you do that? What does that look like? What does it look like? I've talked about it for the past, like, I don't know how many live streams, but that Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, it says, son though he was, he learned obedience through suffering. And it was talking about Jesus. That is the perfect exemplification of what we can do here on this earth, right, is Jesus, because he was perfect. He was both 100% man and 100% God, which is impossible, but possible for God. And his life is the standard that we strive for, right? And if it's stated in the Bible, which is the book that we're supposed to be constructing our beliefs and constructing our methodology in which how we interact with the world, if he is the golden standard that we strive for, and it is stated in the text that we are supposed to use that God has given us, that is described and entitled, basically, in the Bible. Paul mentions it for once, saying, for instance, saying the Bible is God breathed. If that's true, and it's stated that Jesus learned obedience through suffering, then the pursuit, just the pure pursuit of happiness and seeking pleasure, it's heretical for one, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Despite it looking great and feeling great initially, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. There's been so much psychological and philosophical and all this research on it, and it's interesting how that's not what we would think initially. We'd be like, man, it feels good to do this. I should keep doing this more. And it doesn't work. It doesn't. And we'll trick ourselves into thinking that it works like all the time. We do, because we remember that first feeling that we had doing it. And we can literally just convince ourselves that just because I don't feel that same feeling this time doesn't mean it's not good for me. Dr. Griselda, can you unfold the drug as pure happiness in our world chasing pleasure, and your take on doing them or not? Sure. Absolutely. And Griselda, thank you so much for coming. She has a podcast herself called Unexpectedly Successful, as you can see by her title, and it is very good. I do believe God will bless it and it will blow up. I think it's predominantly based in women business owners, I believe, and she's very good at interviewing. She lets the other person that is being interviewed speak, that is such a big deal. I don't know if you've ever watched a podcast where they bring on guests and they just like talk the whole time. That's a hard skill to learn, right? And so check that out. Check her out. She's amazing. So I will go into that. Can you unfold the drug as pure happiness in our world, chasing pleasure, and your take on doing them or not? Okay, so I have experience with them myself personally. And I'm not going to lie, at the time it feels good. It does. Like anyone that tells you, yeah, it just feels like trash is lying. Just to be, holier than thou or anything, they're lying. It feels good. It does. Especially when you get into that state that is so far from being sober. It does. It numbs things, right? And of course, everyone has different chemical dispositions and neural wiring and networking in their brain. So drugs affect others differently than, say, another person. But it feels good and it's fun. But over time, not even over time, maybe that night, you realize it's not real, right? It's not. It's empty because you didn't have to spend anything to get it. What is how do you find intrinsic value in things, right? This is a point I was going to get to. So thank you very much for asking this question. We as people base our intrinsic value on things based on the cost of them. Correct? And I think that's why in the Bible it's stated so many times that there's a sacrifice to following the Lord, to doing things the Lord's way. There's a suffering in it. There's a reason why it was stated that Jesus learned obedience through suffering. And when you do drugs, you're you're straight lining happiness straight to your brain, right? It interacts and kicks off the dopamine circuits, and you're just like flooded with it. But there's no cost to it. You just inject it straight in your veins in some cases. Well, literally, you can. And the lack of there being a cost to it leaves you hollow over time. And also, the tethers, the relationships you build with others based on that activity and hobby, because it's just the same as any other hobby, in the fact that when you do drugs, you hang out with other people that do drugs because you'll feel alienated by other people that don't do drugs. And they'll start speaking to the unconscious or subconscious or that side of you that questions what you're doing. Now, you can get so far lost down the rabbit hole that you don't question it anymore, I believe. But you usually like doing things with other people that are also partaking in the activity. And therefore, something such as drugs, you're all feeling good, right? And when you're not feeling good, as in you're not high anymore or whatever it may be, you know that state of mind is not as exciting as when you're on the drugs. So you are in this pursuit of, yeah, you are in a hedonistic pursuit of just being happy, and you disregard the ramifications of it. And it's it is a crazy cycle, because the more you do the drugs, the more you're in that mental state where you can't see what's happening to you, really. You can't, because you're high all the time, right? And if you keep your mind focused on just getting the next fix, you'll disregard what's happening to your body. You may notice it, but I mean, one of the ways you could fix feeling bad about what's happening to you is just get high again, right? And the fact that it doesn't cost anything, you don't gain any experience from it. There is a sacrifice to it, but it's not in the same manner as learning something. We are not consciously sacrificing our time in the same way of doing something that feels bad for the sake of the future, right? Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. Does that make sense, Griselda? Does that answer your question at all? I believe it is the fact that we don't have to spend anything. There isn't an accrued cost to us. There's no suffering in the sense wherein it doesn't cost us time in the same manner, where we are sacrificing pleasure now for the fruits of our labors in the future. Right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everybody? I hope I explained that okay. Because when you do anything in life, like I was taking that example of losing weight, it is the journey that's really fulfilling, right? It's just like Olympic gold medalists. They talk about the depression thereafter. That's because think about this huge journey they've been on. It's been giant. Some of them train, like I read something about Usain Bolt. He was saying, like, I spent like, what was it? Did he say 10 years or 9 years or whatever to run 9 seconds? Then it's done. Just like that. That goal you had set, you achieved it. Now what? Now what? Right? Just like I'm a big fan of Jocko. He taught me tons of things I know about leadership. He's one of the, I would say, digital mentors that God has placed in my life to learn from. Hugely influential to me. He talks about this all the time. He is a Navy SEAL. He's a Navy SEAL. He was a Navy SEAL commander, and he brings on people, vets, from the military, and he talks about how you have to have a mission after your military career, or else you just are lost. And you see this all the time, people that retire from the military and their just life goes down the drain because they don't have another mission. It's the same thing in life. Like sacrifice and suffering for things that you want to do, and the process of learning and the depth of your current understanding to bring about the fruition of a greater understanding of the world. That whole process, that cycle fueled by the faith of God and doing things that don't logically make sense, but you know that God has your back and that you should live a life of not being careful, but being like God at your hip and being like, I know this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway because I know that you have something greater for me and everyone can call me crazy. There's so many characters in the Bible where that little scenario is depicted. There's a reason for that. It's because this cycle, that is what true achievement and that is what the true following of God looks like and how to interact with the world. It's not seeking initial pleasure at the behest of others, at the cost of others. It's not being selfish. It's not being caught up in this world. Think about the whole idea of going to heaven thereafter. We know there's something after this. And it's depicted in the Bible that there are treasures up in heaven after this, right? And you see prophets in the Bible, which are weird characters kind of in the Bible because they do really disgusting things, right? I think it was what book is it? Oh, which book is it? Is it I can't remember the book off the top of my head, but I believe it's the prophet Elijah. He cooks food with feces. It's like that's disgusting. How does that make sense? How does that make sense? What would Christians think about that today? Tell me that. That's disgusting. But he's supposed to do it. Didn't make any sense. That's more disgusting than building a boat when you're in a drought. In certain ways, because I guess building the boat in a drought, you'd be ridiculed by the populace and it would take a long time. But that journey is what is really fulfilling in life. It is. Hi, Charisse. Does that make sense, Griselda? I hope that makes sense. My take on doing them or not is don't do them because there isn't a cost. Now, and I'm saying that there are some drugs that are different than others, I believe. My stance on marijuana is, for me in my life, it's not a good drug for me. I just don't. It makes me. It's interesting because I had a big habit problem with it. I get obsessed with things. If anyone knows me personally, they know this. When I do something, I am all in 100%. And that's why I have a hard time dabbling in things. And so marijuana was something for me that I smoked it all the time, every night. I'll just be transparent. When I grew up in my small town, maybe this is why God made me to like, I don't know, odd stuff, but I'd spent a lot of nights in the graveyard by myself in my car smoking weed all the time. And I would contemplate things all the time, just like I'm doing now. I've been doing this my entire life. And that's just how I'm wired. And I would find peace in like going into that state of mind and being with the bodies of those that have already passed on. Or maybe it's not even that, but being at the place that us as humans have architecturally created as the place where we rest. And I would always think about like, these people are here, they were done, but their spirits are gone. And I don't know, I've always felt like when I would go to the graveyards at night and like smoke weed and just contemplate life and listen to music, I remember I remember that I would think that I related to the idea of people being not connected to this space, to other people that are living in this world anymore, because I always felt so, I don't know if unique is the right word, because that has a positive connotation to it. I always felt like my mind just worked way differently than everyone else's. So it brought me peace to know that like I was with these people that ran their race and they were expired, right? But I always look at that in like a respectful sense. Like I honored that. And I never death to me isn't really a sad thing. This place is really cruel. Life's really hard. Just existing is suffering. And that's why the Bible, God's such a genius in the words that he's written in suffering is how we bring about revelation. Wrestling with God, that term, is how we bring about divine revelation. It's so when I think about death and people that were in the graveyard when I was smoking weed, it was like they ran their race and they're gone now, but they're in a better place now, at least some of them. And I don't know, I always felt really, really comfortable there. That may sound really bad, but it's true. I always felt peace there, always. Because, well, for one, logically, people don't come to a graveyard at night, right? So I could do my marijuana and I could smoke it and not really be bothered at night. And yeah, I always felt peace there for some reason because I felt it was like closer to heaven than interacting with people alive. I don't know. Um, so what I was saying, doing them or not, for me, marijuana was bad. Went down a rabbit hole. Sorry. I'm not sorry, actually. Doing marijuana was bad for me because I got obsessed with it and it would eat my, you know, money to do things and it would eat my thoughts to do things. And it just put me in a place where I was like kind of in a stupor a little bit. It would it would trigger some creativity, some creative sides of me, but at the same time, it kind of made me just lazier. It did make me lazier. And I feel like I'm more creative when I'm sober, which some people aren't. And I'm not going to say that marijuana is bad or good. I don't know. I don't know if marijuana is bad or good for you. And I also think that psilocybin, stuff like mushrooms and other things, there are fields of research now that have shown things. We have a friend that is in Daniels Den, Griselda. If you're still listening, Russ, he got cured from his habit of drugs by doing some. It was I don't think it's experimental. It was a it was a method of healing by taking in hallucinogenics, right? I believe that's the right term. He took like they gave him certain drugs that brought about that where you're tripping, right? And it took his mind to a place where he was healed from it. And there's tribes all over the world that have used drugs and combinations of herbs in order to bring about certain states of mind, in order to connect to something that we can't really perceive while we're sober. And I think in those senses, in those specific cases, I don't think I would label them as bad. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Now I think it takes a certain person to be able to be mature enough and mindful enough to do those things in a way that would bring about positive results. And yeah, I know that's maybe a controversial topic, but I think it's been done throughout the span of time. I can't remember what book there was, but there was someone that there's a what book was it? I have it written down in my notes. I should look it up sometime, but I haven't read it. But somebody said that the whole Bible was written sourced by he notes all of the relations to mushrooms in the Bible. I don't know what that's like because I don't see it, but yeah, apparently there is, and it's an amazing book. So I will have to look that up. There's some guy. It was written like the 1800s, I think. Anyway, so that's my take is on it is no, don't do drugs because I think we're better sober. But I think there is specific cases where like psilocybin and things of that nature where you can put yourself in a state of mind that can be utilized for the greater. And I don't know if it's wrong or not. I have no idea according to the Bible. I hope that answers your question. But when it comes to like meth, coke, or anything like that, that's unnatural, I would say that's probably wrong, I think. Um, absolutely, right? Because it's just destructive. Look at what it does. You look at it and it's like, yeah, that's trash because there's no cost to it. And name someone that you know that does drugs and it's ended up good for them. That's terrible. So doing like chemical drugs, I think, is very bad. But then you get into the topic of, well, what if the hallucinogenic, like the one that Russ was given, was a chemical? Is that bad? Because it healed him. I'm pretty sure it was a chemical. Maybe it was mush. I'll have to ask him. Uh, is that bad too? What if you're just putting more chemicals in your brain, like DMT, that already reside there? You're just increasing the volume of it. Is that bad? I don't know. That's really complicated. But I think like anything, there's context to it. And just overall, doing drugs is stupid. That's my opinion. I don't do them because they don't correlate with the way that I want to live my life and they don't work for me. I hope that answers your question. Microdosing. Yep. Charisse, you had something. Took me 14 years to finish all of my schooling and finishing with 2 masters. I was happy when I was in school, but once I finished, I felt empty and lost. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's why I just was actually listening to, well, from Content Creation Academy. If you guys are in Daniel's Den that knows what that is, it's a program that's ran by Darius Daniels, this pastor out of Change Church, and Myron Golden, who is a very successful man, used to be a senior pastor. He uses the Bible in a lot of ways he really likes making a lot of money. He believes in it, and he doesn't think money is an evil thing, which I agree with him. Nevertheless, he said something last night. He was like, this is going to be crazy to hear, but he says he doesn't like setting goals, because that kind of blew my mind hearing that. It blows my mind saying that, but it makes sense. Setting goals in the sense where us as humans, he says he doesn't like them because people will get upset that they haven't done it in time. Like they'll set I think his specifications around that statement was setting a timeline for your goal. I want to do this by this year. It's like, God doesn't work like that, right? And so people will have this human understanding of their goal. He didn't say that much, but he was saying people will get disappointed by not getting in a time. It like sets yourself up for failure. And then he did bring up verses in the Bible in Genesis where he was saying how God created on the first day, he created lightness was after dark. If you look at it, let me look at the verse. But he was bringing about how, I think it's Genesis 2. It says it's Genesis chapter 1. Never mind. God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface and deep. And God said, let there be surface. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. So there was darkness before light. And he was talking about how there's always darkness before light. And like if you're striving for the right thing, it's shown in the Bible through different stories and scenarios that if you are doing the right thing, there is going to be trouble, which actually goes into what I'm talking about today. If you pursue pleasure just for the sake of pleasure, it will end up terribly because there is no sacrifice and suffering. Because even in the Bible, it is depicted that going after the thing that you want, there are going to be trials. There are going to be hardships. There's going to be chaotic things that knock you off of your feet. And, sometimes it's something wherein it doesn't make sense for a loving God to allow this to happen to you. And that's also where that scenario of our knowledge, just being cognizant of the fact that there is a heaven after this, where God is storing our treasures. There's a place after this. That's why having just that knowledge is so helpful, because there's things in life that happen to you that are cruel. You can wake up one day, get a pain in your side, cancer, no coming back. Not here anyway. But then if you're a Christian and you believe in the Bible and what's written there is true and factual, then you understand that there's a place beyond here. And so setting goals with a timeline attached to them sets us up. The way I perceived that was our human understanding, our earthly understanding is not big enough. It's not big enough to encompass what God wants to do in our life. And our understanding can't handle all the knowledge that God has of us and all the characteristics that He's placed in us and the trials and the things that we can actually get through, because we are going to have hardship before we get to the promised land, for instance. Hey, Arian. Dude, thank you so much for popping in. I love you. Griselda, thank you for sharing your heart. Hey, thank you for listening. So, what was the next question? Isn't there more than life than just this? It was after that when I reconnected and God showed me my purpose. Yep. So yeah, that's what I was talking about. Just like Olympic gold medalists, when they win, it's been documented. There's huge depressions that happen after that. That's why the process and having the pinnacle of your hierarchy should be something beyond you and something that requires sacrifice to attain. And I think there's a reason why having God at the top of it makes so much sense, because I've said this before in the last stream, where just Christianity as a whole, to me, it just seems like legitimately and genuinely the best way to live your life here. Like, I know we see people and actual depictions and experiences of Christians taking the Bible and doing malevolent things with it, using the spiritual aspect of it and the power that has on us to influence and bring about selfish desires in a pursuit of pleasure, basically, for that leader or whoever it is. We've seen it ran as a cult. We've seen Christianity do terrible things to people. We have. Like, that's a fact. And I think that's because it is so powerful. I think the fact that it is so powerful, and the way, if you live this way, the way the text is written, I think the fact that it actually works is why it's so powerful and why it can be used for such great and dark things. I think that's why, because it has this duplicity to it. It does. Does anyone else have any questions? Pastor Steve preached last week and shared that we can avoid disappointment by not putting timelines on our hopes. Yep. So I think there's a caveat to that too, because sometimes I don't really know how to really say it, but if we don't put some sort of timeline on our goals or things that we want in life, we can have a tendency to stray off the path. And it's complicated. Yeah, we drift. So I think it's like this and that. I think you should have measurable markers, and I think you should strive for a standard, because it is a marker. Now, time can be used as a unit of measurement, right? Just like anything can be. And our perception of time is completely different than God's. But I think the absolute complete discarding of time as a measurement in accordance to how well you are doing on your journey, I don't know if I agree with that 100%, but I agree with being with the mindset of understanding that stuff might happen outside of the way that I have planned, because God's plans are greater than mine. Therefore, I believe that as long as you keep God at the pinnacle of your belief hierarchy your value hierarchy, right? Things will work themselves out because there's stuff going on that's greater than this. Does that make sense? Milestones, yes, exactly. Does that make sense? The goals thing, set goals, do not become obsessed with the time frame, but do have some goals. I agree. And I think we can use myself for instance. Like, for instance, so I'm in pursuit of a wife, and therefore someone with my mindset of being like obsessed with things, like my work, for instance, or things I feel God calling me to, I can just get drawn into my work so much that I'll disregard something like that, right? Because I will, because I feel I just can. It just happens to me. And part of that could be, to be transparent, part of that could be the uncomfortability that comes with approaching women, a stranger that you don't know. And so maybe subconsciously and consciously, I just avoid that more than pushing into my work because I know what the pain feels like of doing my work. I know what the pain feels like of not wanting to work anymore and crying through it and not caring how I feel. And I'm more familiar with that pain than approaching a person of the opposite sex, which I am interested in and attracted to, and not so much that specific person, but the potential that they have. That's what I see. Whenever you see someone, a stranger in a relationship, you don't see them. We don't see them. What psychologist was it? Was it John Piaget? The behavioral, he was like the father of behavioral psychology. He studied children. I think it was him. Was it him? I think so, but I think maybe. I think he argued that, was it him? I don't think it was. What psychologist? There's a psychologist. I'll look it up. There's a psychologist that was saying that our brains, we don't actually see objects. We don't see that. We see the perceptions of it, right? We see the potential of things, right? We don't actually see the people. When we go up to people and have a conversation with them, we don't see them. We see the potential of the conversation, right? And we have a negativity bias as people as well. Therefore, when our brains we go and start feeling displeasure when the conversation isn't going the proper way we would imagine it before. And this also speaks to having goals. And this also speaks to our humanistic and our earthly standard of understanding. And what I spoke, how many live streams ago was it? But I spoke on how if you have an idea of what a person should be that you have in your, I want these character traits in my friend group or whatever. I said that I discarded that in the past, despite like mentors that God has given me in my life saying to do that because of this right here, what I'm talking about. When I was doing research in psychology and whatnot, it's like absolutely true that with the negativity bias as well, and us not seeing people as people, we see them as potential in conversations. When our mind starts picking up these negative things from people, these negative traits, right? Our negativity bias and our predisposition to go down that path, we can just want to discard them right away. Be like, oh, this isn't worth it. This person isn't for me, right? How many times have you thought that something was something and then God showed you it was something different later on because you had to give it a chance? Jesus, this just came to me now. God's really good. So Jesus had a goal of accomplishing his calling for God, right? And Jesus must have thought that there was a possibility to accomplish the calling in another way because he was on his knees in the garden crying to God, if there's another way, God, please, let's do it that way. I don't want to get nailed to a piece of wood. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to conquer death. Well, he did want to conquer death and accomplish his calling, but he wanted to do it a different way. And therefore he must have at least thought it was a possibility if he's asking his dad for it, right? Because he knows his dad can do all things. And therefore, if Jesus even thought that that was a possibility and he was drawn to the negativity of his future actions, don't you think we're going to be drawn to that too? in conversations with people, and we're going to think mentally we can be on our hands and knees being like, God, this person isn't for me. I know you have someone for me because you can do anything. And we'll just discard them instantly when we should have just like kept them around. And maybe maybe the whole reason why their traits wouldn't align to, let's say, your predisposition or the traits that you preconceived as your team needing, maybe them not having those traits was because God knows what you need more than you do. And because those traits that you want are the traits you're comfortable with, or the traits that you perceive you're uncomfortable with. So that's why you want them. But really, God knows more than you do. Maybe if you just give things a chance, even though they feel like hell and don't make any sense, this person might be good for you, right? And it's along that same line of thought where we don't see objects, we see perceptions, the potential of things. We see ideas, we see scenarios. Does that make sense? I know that's a lot. What psychologist believed we didn't see objects, we seen potential? Was it? I think it was Jean Piaget. I think it was. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, I totally believe that. And I mean, that also goes to why you would have the pinnacle at the top of your hierarchy of values is pursuing pleasure, because it makes sense. Real logically, it does, right? He was him experiencing every emotions in life, and how you can push past emotions. He had to feel desperation to connect with us. So I agree. And when I agree with that statement. And when I was saying he's being drawn to negativity, well, he was. Mentally, he was. He had to be. If he was on his hands and knees crying, or if he was on his knees crying, his mind was in a negative state. He wasn't off his knees. He wasn't not sweating blood. He wasn't not pleading for God to take this from him, to do it another way. So crying in desperation isn't negative. Well, it isn't being joyful, which is what we are instructed to do. It is not being joyful. Because actually, yeah, Myron just said that last night. He was saying we are like commanded to, it's a big deal. Well, it is in the Bible. We are supposed to perceive hardship as joy, right? That's a huge thing. Like, that's a big hurdle that us as humans are supposed to climb over. And yeah, I do believe that Jesus, obviously him being human, was part of him experiencing that emotion. He was 100% God and 100% human. But we're supposed to be joyful. We're commanded to be joyful. And yeah, it's God always he it's depicted in the Bible, things that hardship and suffering, we're supposed to turn it on its head ideologically. Like, mentally, our mindset's supposed to be, it is good that I'm suffering because I'm learning through this right now, right? And so that's different than suffering through something and crying about it. Now, I don't think you should never cry about it, because if you keep things inside, it will just eat you up. I'm just saying, I think Jesus experienced that state where he was on his knees with his Father, asking for God to please take that task from him in that specific way, because he wanted to be able to do it in another way, which I don't blame him. Being killed by your own chosen people that you were sent here to save that's insanity. Pleading and crying out is still having hope. Yeah, I agree. This is coming from someone that cries and pleads actively. But I'd be lying to myself if I said that I was happy when that was happening, right? But I would be, absolutely, because, well, we're not perfect, so God's expecting that of us to exhibit that behavior. So it's okay. It's just, I know when I'm crying out to God. I mean, it's depicted in the Bible where that man goes up to Jesus. He says, Jesus, I believe, but help me with my unbelief. So there's a duplicitous manner to our belief system, and God knows it can exist, that we can believe and not believe at the same time. And that we need help with that. And therefore, he knows we're going to mess up, right? And so I believe, yeah, absolutely. I think Jesus, oh yeah, he wasn't wanting it to go like that. But yeah, so yeah, that's complicated, huh? It's good. Yeah, we don't see the joy or the happiness until we look back in reverse. Absolutely, we don't. A lot of the times. That happens so many times in my life. It's like, "Hey, that sucked, but I'm glad I went through it." And that's why suffering matters, because you learn things from it. Your knowledge base has to die. And you don't always have to suffer for everything, right? There are some things that you just learn and it seems painless, and it is painless. Um Yeah. Does that make sense? Anybody else got anything else on the on Genesis 19, 1 through 16? It's a crazy chat. It's a crazy set of verses. Like these men are trying to rape these angels. It's crazy. We can't just go and do things just because they make us feel good. It sets us up for failure because it's not going to feel that good the 20th time you do it. Anyone else have anything? I believe I'm going to stop there for the day, because this has been a great stream, and I thank you all very much for coming and participating. I will be on again Sunday. I will be on again Sunday at 8 a.m., 7:45 to 8 a.m., I think, Central Time. And let me know how you guys like this. So I took like the days to prepare the material for this. And I wrote all this down and I didn't even really use a lot of it. So I have a lot more to go from. I'll make like part one, two, or two, three, and four from this. I don't know. I have a lot. But I mean, that's a testament to God that I'm able to bring things out of my own mind for my own opinions rather than just the notes from others. And I would encourage you to do that, right? Like if you're learning from a mentor, I was just talking to someone about this, that, and this may be hard for some people to hear, but I think it's good to see you too, Zephyr. Think about this. I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to ask if you guys would do something and bring it for next time, like a question for you. But initially, when I'm in self-development groups and I'm in just circles in life, or I am in a group of friends and whatnot, or let's say it could be a part of the martial arts gym or somewhere. There's leaders in all these settings, in all these relational circles. One thing I have noticed is the people that you really pick out of those groups and you can just tell that there's something different about them, their language is unique to themselves. And they don't sound like a carbon copy of the leader that they have learned things from. And that usually happens a little later on down the stages after. I can't put a timeline on it, but you can tell the evolution of a person mentally and psychologically, and the maturing of a person into their own identity, right? Into the person that God is calling them into to bring about the calling to fruition that he is putting on their life, the calling he's putting on their life. I've noticed that if you see people that are like, there's something about them that's different, they have their own language, whereas others that just join a group or just join a martial arts gym or whatever, you can see the influence of the leader. It falls on them differently and they absorb it differently and they exhibit it differently, right? And they're like really revolutionary thinkers in life. They'll know others and their language will come from others as well, but they also have this unique aspect of them that is true to themselves and it is unique in the way that God has made them. And they express it. They have the courage to stand on their own 2 feet, their own personality and the own thoughts and predispositions that God has given them rather than stand on the platform that another person is standing on for their calling that God has given them. Does that make sense? And I've noticed that over time. So I would just encourage you, you know, just like I was saying, like God, he makes it so I can come up with my own ideas despite like pulling all this information from others. And if you would listen to the people I listen to, you would find the similarities, but you would also see the uniqueness in what I am saying, right? And I'm not saying that to be prideful or anything. I'm not any better than anyone that listens to this at all. At all. I'm not. There's stuff that you're better than me at that I will never, ever be better than you at, ever. And I have no interest to be. And even if I was interested in it, I couldn't do it. Anyway, so saying that, I would ask for next time, if anyone listens to this and wants to come on Sunday around 7:45 this Sunday, what is it, January 21st, 7:45 a.m. to like 8:15 a.m. Central-ish, I'd ask you, what does it look like for you during the times when you put the pursuit of pleasure at the top of your value hierarchy? What does that look like for you? And have you been doing it and not knowing it? It's okay. It's not a big deal. I've debated on whether going live Sunday or not, but I would ask you that. Assess yourself and think about the past. Maybe it can be events in your past, but think about if you have had times in your life, or if you do now, and you have the pursuit of pleasure at the top of your hierarchy and what that looks like and what has happened from enacting that ideology out. Let me know next time or leave it in the comments. And yeah, thank you very much for coming. I love you. And I will see you Sunday, hopefully. If not Sunday, I will see you Monday. I will be in my lab cooking up information and being crazy. And thank you so much for all of you that popped in. Like it really means a lot to me. Just this week, I left some self-development groups that were a big building block to me, and they meant a lot to me, and they were foundational. And just as I was speaking to, it was ran by Darius Daniels, which he does this group called Daniel's Den, and another one was Bible U, which is basically like seminar, but in a digital sense. And I would recommend them to anyone that wants to better themselves. Daniel's Den is more of a self-development group, and Bible U is more theologically based in understanding the Bible. And I would recommend them to anyone, but I've been a part of them for a couple years now, and I finally left because I felt God calling me to. And I have in my past, if you would look at my timeline and my events, you would see that I historically have a hard time leaving things and I'm loyal to a fault. So despite you hearing me talk about just doing things, no matter what it feels like, if you would see my life, say, beyond 4 years ago, I have always stayed in things and God has had to slam doors in my face. And I'm sure I still do stay in things now that I'm supposed to leave. And it is hard for me. It is not easy at all. And I left both them groups this week, and they were a big part of building me into who I am now. And I know God is just calling me to go be the architect of what he's calling me to do, not only here, but in my programming endeavors as well. And I have so much peace about it that it is insane. And a lot of people won't understand, but there's a reason why Jesus said, Not even in his hometown could he perform miracles because they knew who he was growing up into the 30-year-old man he was when he started his ministry. And in 3 years, he did more than any other person on earth. And sometimes you have to leave things in order for God to bring, you always have to leave things in order for God to bring to fruition what he wants to in your life. Now, it may be things, it may be events, it may be people, it may be mindsets, but you have to leave things in order to better yourself sometimes. God has, it's depicted in the Bible over and over. Abraham, leave your homeland, everything that you know, to a place I will show you. He's not even going to show Abraham where he was going. It's like, trust him and go. So I did that, and it's been amazing. It's been crazy. I've been using the time there to dump into my material for here, and I'm just trusting God will do something with this. And I trust God will do something in your life as well. And if you have any recommendations, or if you disagree with me or agree with me or whatever, I would love for you to like, subscribe, or whatever you want to do. And I would just love to hear from you. And I hope to see you in the next one. And God loves you, and you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Peace.